This is a Fox News alert. Police reporting 5 fatalities after shots fired inside the newsroom of Maryland newspaper, the Capital Gazette. A suspect has been apprehended and is being interviewed, but police are still working to clear the scene. We get Trace Gallagher with the very latest. Trace, what can you tell us?
Kimberly, we just learned a few minutes ago there are now 5 dead, which is why we stay away from the numbers in these cases because they're always wrong. The 5 dead is the first time we had heard that all day long. Police finally confirming that just a short time ago. We also know that other people are injured. They're saying several injuries, and we know that one of them is being held at a local medical center, and another one is being held at the Arundel County Medical Center, which is now on lockdown for some reason. It's about a little less than a mile away from the scene of the shooting, and the question is, we don't know why it's on lockdown. It's got 2 patients there, and for the time being, the hospital is on lockdown. We have some highways that go through there. Major intersections are also being shut down for the time being. We should point out the suspect apparently gave up without a fight. One of the reporters on scene said that he stopped firing. He didn't know why he stopped firing, and then when police surrounded him, he gave up. And by now, we would know a lot about the suspect, maybe his social media footprint, the reason why he may have been in that building or near that building, and if he had posed any threats at an earlier time. But we're being told that this suspect, a male in his 20s, apparently did not have ID on him, and because he didn't have ID, he's not cooperating with police. So it's unclear if police have identified him. There's a very good chance they have, but there's, in these instances, reasons why names don't leak out. We almost always get initial names that we check out. You don't go with them until police confirm them. But in this case, we have gotten no release on any kind of identity of the shooter at all. This is one of the oldest newspapers in the country. It's been around for some 200 years, and we check things like the ideological bent. What does the paper cover? Is there a motive? Is there a reason why this paper may have been targeted? It covers things like local politics, the Capitol, the Naval Academy. But they came out and came in favor of a Democratic moderate candidate in the last primary, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of severe ideological bent that the paper had, which would lead you to think that the motive might play a part in that. The concern that police have right now is that are other media organizations being threatened. This particular one didn't have any security at all. We heard reports that he shot through a glass window, but the building was unsecured, so anybody could just walk in and open fire. We're being told the weapon was a shotgun, but again, police have not confirmed that. It's owned by the Baltimore Sun. Earlier, the Baltimore Sun was also swept as a security precaution. There was no threat there. There was no reason to do that. And now there are some media companies, even in New York, that are being guarded, little extra security, by the NYPD to make sure that there are no further threats. Right now, we're trying to get some word on who this shooter was and why he walked in to one of the oldest newspapers in the country, Kimberly, and opened fire.
Okay, so some interesting details there as the facts begin to emerge. And like you said, Trace, the officials that came out said that from a tactical standpoint, the area, the perimeter, et cetera, is secure, which means they don't believe that there are any other, accomplices or other shooters, active shooters in the area. So that's good. I guess the troubling aspect is that you say there hasn't been any positive identification, which probably explains why we have very little shooter information, just a white male in his 20s. They said that it's active in terms of, from an investigative standpoint, inside the building, still trying to recover ballistics and forensics to identify the type of weapon used and exactly the specific location where the shooting occurred. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's a very good point you made, Kim, because what happens is when they go through these types of situations, there's always this standard operating procedure, a checklist, if you will, on how they go about doing these things. And we should note that inside this building, the Capital Gazette is just one of the many businesses in there. There's a cardiac care unit, there are dentists, there are lawyers, there are other businesses in here. There are 55 employees that we know of at the Capital Gazette, and we're told that many of them, them because their reporters were actually out in the field doing their job, so we don't know exactly how many were inside. But when they process scenes like this, the reason that clearly it's still an active scene is because, one, you have the coroner who's either on scene or is about to arrive for the 5 bodies that are still inside there. And then you have to find out. There were reports earlier there may be explosives on the campus. That has not been confirmed. That is also kind of a standard procedure the police go through ever since Columbine to see if the place may have been cased, if this might have been pre-planned and that explosives might have been part of the attack scene. That's one of those things, along with multiple shooters, that every police department goes through. We believe that everybody inside the building has been evacuated who is able to walk out. We know in these types of situations people can shelter in place. They often do, and they often are the last people to leave the building. In this case, police are telling us that everybody who was inside, all the offices, whether it's the dental office or the newspaper, have been taken out of the building. It's now the coroner is on scene. It's a crime scene, and this building will be closed for several days to come while they process this crime and try to figure out a motive. Kimberly.
All right, Trace, we're going to take it around the table for some more questions. So thanks for that. Greg, you have a question.
Well, I know that there's this question of whether this is the part of some kind of trend, and people are worried if there are other targets in the media, because this isn't just a crime scene; it's also a newspaper. And I'm trying to remember, like, how often does this occur? And I've only come up with 2 shootings, one from August 2015 when a reporter was shot on live television by a former colleague, and then in August 2007 at the Oakland Post, an editor was murdered to prevent a story coming out. So these things are incredibly rare, and I wonder if it's wise that people in the media see this as some kind of other disturbing trend that may begin, when in fact this could be the variables that we know. A male in his 20s, which we've heard before, so we know that it could be anything.
It could be anything, Greg. I mean, you go back to Charlie Hebdo in France, and you don't know if there is some reason, some ideological reason. In that case, there was, why this happened. We don't think there is, because the paper itself doesn't appear very ideological. It's a local newspaper. They cover local topics. They do endorse candidates. I'm not sure if that upset anybody. I'm not sure if there was some local investigation into some business that these local newspapers want to do. But as far as we can see, at least on the face of it, there doesn't seem to be any outward reason why this paper would be targeted. The second question becomes, this person didn't walk into the office and go after certain people. The reporting we have from Phil Davis, which, by the way, was amazing stuff, very compelling, that he gave, said that he simply walked up to a glass window and opened fire. And if you did not hear it, Phil Davis, Greg, gave this amazing interview to the Baltimore Sun, which is the parent company of the Capitol, and he said, and I just want to read a part of this, he said, "I'm a police reporter. I write about this stuff, not necessarily to this extent, but shootings and death all the time. But as much as I'm going to try to articulate how traumatizing it is to be hiding under your desk, you don't know until you're there, and you feel helpless." He went on to say, "I don't know why. I don't know why he stopped," meaning the shooter. He said he opened fire. His colleagues were being shot around him. He was under the desk. And then the shooter suddenly just stopped. He said the police surrounded him, and by all accounts, the shooter gave up without a fight. As to why he went in there, as to why he targeted this, that is the primary focus of the investigation going forward.
Okay,
Greg.
Trey. So, Dana, obviously they have to collect all these witness, statements to be able to find out and piece together what happened. Your question.
I actually don't have a question for Trace, but one for you. So, during Neil Cavuto's hour, they had the press conference with the police department, and one of the things they said, well, now we know from Trace that he didn't have identification, so they might not know who he is, but how long is it before apprehending somebody and questioning them? Like, what is the thinking from a prosecutor standpoint if you're doing an investigation? How much time do you want to wait before you go in there and talk to them?
Yeah, from a tactical standpoint, the first thing to do is secure the perimeter, make sure there's no other suspects or other accomplices, and make sure there are no, other weapons or any other items that could be explosive devices that could detonate and cause further casualties. Once you do that, then you begin the investigatory aspect of it, and then you go through and take witness statements. But primary concern would be the suspect, especially when you take someone into custody and they're alive. So you have to determine their identity. They're going to print him. They're going to run him through the FBI system and try to identify exactly who it is they're dealing with, and then try to obtain, witness statements and specifically get the suspect to waive his rights and get some statement there to make sure there isn't anything else that's being planned in the works, other people he might have been working through on the outside. They want to determine ownership, of the weapon. How did he obtain it? Was this somebody that had any mental illness? Are there other devices at his house? Are there other devices at another place of work that he might work at, or something else that was planned in the future? So it's quite, involved. But a primary concern, I would say, at this point, besides tending to the people that are injured, God bless, is identification of the suspect.
Interesting.
Jesse, you have a question?
Sure, Trace, I'm just curious about the security posture inside the building itself. So when the gunman goes inside the building, is there any security guard there? Are there metal detectors? And did he have to breach a security barrier in order to gain entry and start firing? And then when he does open fire, how long was he firing through this glass window before he was neutralized by, were police officers that were already on the scene? Were they called in? Or was it a security team that was operating inside the building? Do you know? Yeah, all good question, Jesse. When I was on with Shep early going, I was saying that, when I go into newsrooms, whether they're newspapers in small towns and big towns and television stations, every single newspaper and newsroom I have been in has security you have to walk through, because there is this feeling in this country that newsrooms, and Greg pointed out there's been very few of them, but there's this feeling in America that newsrooms, news reporters may be targets. And we're being told by the manager of this office building that there is no security at all, that you can simply walk right in the building, one, and then you can walk right into the headquarters of the Capitol Gazette. So there was no security at all. We're told this person had a shotgun, and that when he walked in, he opened fire through a glass window. Now, it's unclear if the glass window was the first window that he came upon and he just opened fire, or if he walked around through the cubicles and found a glass window in an office and opened fire. That is all very unclear at this point in time. We simply know that he opened fire, and from Phil Davis's reporting, the crime reporter who I read you his account a short time ago, he says that he opened fire, he got under his desk, he kept firing, and then he suddenly stopped. He didn't hear anything. He doesn't know why he stopped, but the man stopped. And as far as when police arrived, we're told that police were actually on scene within 60 seconds of the shots being fired, and that the shooter was surrounded and the shooter gave up. There was no exchange of gunfire, and by all accounts, this man simply gave up, and now we're being told he did not have ID on him, and that police took him away, and they're trying to figure out, one, who he is, and two, what his motive is. But it's also interesting because Dana makes a good point normally, or Kimberly makes a good point. Normally, you would have a second scene. They would have this shooter's house under surveillance, or being searched right now to find out if there's a motive in there. And so far, our cameras have been focused on the actual shooting scene at the newspaper and no other scene, which is, at this point in the investigation, somewhat odd, because there would be a car, there would be an extra home, there would be some location that they would go to, a secondary location that would glean more information that might tell them more about why this person did what he did.
Yeah, Trace, Juan has a question, but usually they go right away and take a look and examine the suspect vehicle, or if someone drove them, et cetera, to see if there's any identifying papers, information, or other weapons, because now they're going to look and see the casings at the scene, collect the ballistics to determine how many shots were fired and exactly what the weapon was. Juan?
So, Trace, the door wasn't locked. You were mentioning that there was no security, but I wondered if there was a locked door, and if he fired the shotgun, then is that the way that he gained access to the newsroom?
It's a great question, Juan. That's what we asked, and police haven't told us that. I mean, I don't know if the door was locked, but my understanding is that this is a suite inside an office building, and that the windows are not on the outside of the hallway. So the assumption would be that he did open a door to actually get into this suite, because if you look at the mailing address, it does have a suite number. Now, we're not saying that's the only suite that they own, or we're not saying that's the primary reason or place the shooting took place, but from the account of the person who actually runs this building, there's no security, and that he was able to walk in, and I guess from when he says walk in, he must mean the front door. So the assumption would be that he did at least walk into a primary front door downstairs, go up or to the suite, and then open the door to the suite, and then from there we don't know. But the reporter on scene says that he shot through a glass window at the people he was shooting at, which brings up the point, was he targeting somebody? Did he know where this person was shooting? Or was he simply shooting at random because he had some type of vendetta against the Capitol for some prior experience or whatever the reason might be? Still a lot of things we don't know, Juan.
And that will be part of the investigation. Trace, we're going to ask you to stay with us, and we're going to bring in Kristen Fisher, who is live on the scene. Kristen. Hi,
Hey, Kimberly. Well, still a ton of questions out here, but one thing I think is certain, and that is that this could have been so much worse. It's already bad, but it could have been so much worse if these first responders didn't get here when they did. The first officers on the scene within 60 seconds. That is how fast they were. They are being praised right now for their quick response. And I literally just got on the scene a few minutes ago, and it is remarkable how many police officers, how many patrol units, how many bomb squads, how many ambulances, how many police cruisers are all over the place. It really is a tremendous presence. We've got helicopters up in the air. So let's just kind of reset. We all know that this started around 2:30, 2:45 this afternoon. This gunman went into the office building. You can see it just behind me. It's that brown brick building with the numbers 888 on the side. Looks like there's a lot of windows. That's where the Capital Gazette newspaper, their offices are, but it's also an office building that houses many other companies as well, doctors' offices, things of that nature. So this shooter apparently went to the front door of the Capital Gazette newspaper, shot through it. We're told that there was, according to the building's manager, no real security. He or she was just able to walk right in. The gunman shot through that front door. It was a glass door, and then proceeded to open fire. And as we've been hearing from one of the reporters at the Capital Gazette, actually the guy who reported on crime and the courts here in Anne Arundel County, he says that the shooter opened fire while all the employees were hiding underneath their desks. And then he said one of the most terrifying sounds he's ever heard was the sound of this gunman trying to reload. Now, as I mentioned, these first responders on the scene, the first officers on the scene, within 60 seconds, they engaged with the gunman. We don't know if he was injured or not, but he is now in police custody. He is being questioned as we speak. There are reports that he is not being very cooperative, but Fox cannot confirm this at that point in time. So it is still locked down. It is still an active crime scene, but no longer an active shooter scene. As for the victims, we know that there are 5 dead, 7 injured. The injured have been rushed to Johns Hopkins Medical Center, which is a level 1 trauma center. There's another Anne Arundel County Medical Center. That's where some of the other injured have been taken. We don't know the severity of their injuries or whatnot. So that is what we're expecting to get some information on in about 10 minutes now. It looks like there is a briefing that is about to take place. We were told 5:30. Looks like it might be happening a little bit sooner here. I just want to talk a little bit about the newspaper that appears to have been targeted, the Capital Gazette. It is one of the oldest newspapers in the country. It is owned by the Baltimore Sun. It doesn't appear to have any kind of political leaning. This is your standard local newspaper. They cover local elections. They cover the Capitol, which is not very far from here in Annapolis. So, you know, of course, this could be somebody that didn't like an article that was written about him, but that is just one of the many possible motives that investigators are looking into right now. And that's really probably the biggest question that people have right now is, why did this happen? What was the motive? We may find out more about that in a few minutes when this briefing does take place. And one more thing, guys, about President Trump. He has been briefed. I believe he was briefed shortly before boarding Air Force One. He sent out his thoughts and prayers to all of the victims' families, and he, of course, praised the first responders for their very quick response. And hopefully, guys, we'll have a bit more once this new briefing takes place.
All right, Kristen Fisher, live from the scene. We're going to ask you to stay with us. And again, alerting that there will be a press conference that is expected at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. The president, as Kristen says, has been notified. And now we're going to bring in Bill Daley, former FBI investigator. Bill, you're joining us now.
Good to be here.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot of cases over the past 12 years together that we've seen. What strikes you from this particular crime scene and investigation?
Well, I mean, so far, and there's very little, obviously, we have to go on, is that this person decided to shoot from the outside and either gaining entry or continue to shoot from the outside. The big question will be whether this was, a very personally motivated issue, meaning a one-on-one type of an incident where he had an issue with a person inside, or was it the organization as a whole? If we would find out that he did not go in and look for individuals, then we'd probably suggest that, at least on first pass, that it could be just something against the organization. And we're not too sure what's in this person's mindset at all to even suggest at this point a true motive. But some of those things start to ring out to us. I mean, I think obviously some of those things, Kimberly, you've covered already before, which as investigators start working on it, they're going to start to very quickly. And I guess the positive news here is that they have someone to interview right away to find out if there were any other people who were either knowingly involved in this or who'll be able to provide a little bit more clarity on the motive behind what's happened. We don't want to make sure there's no one out there who is either looking to perpetrate some other crime or is in some way acting in concert with this individual. And also a bit more around, certainly we want to know, things around acquiring the weapon, and also any other information he may have either posted on the social media, as we well know today people do, or whether it was other kind of, we call leakage in the business, which is what is that breadcrumb trail that he may have left talking to other people or information he let out there suggesting that he either had an issue with a person or the place and he was going to commit such a horrible act.
All right, but we have a bit of an update, and this again is attributed to the AP News is now reporting, confirming that it is a white male shooter in custody and that he is in fact not cooperating with the authorities. So that suggests that he's not giving any statements, further sort of stymieing their efforts in terms of the investigative aspect of this to determine his true identity. Maybe you can take us through the steps in terms of identifying someone like this. If you don't have a suspect vehicle in custody, if you don't have a positive ID on the suspect and they're not cooperating, it makes it a little bit more fraught in terms of obtaining the information.
Yeah, well, at least initially, Kimberly, and from your prosecutor days, it can be a little bit tricky. You want to move very quickly through these things and get as much information as you can. So we certainly would be taking his fingerprints, and those can be looked at very quickly through the FBI's automated system. So that's just a matter of minutes or within a short period of time.
Right.
Also, if they have the weapon, tracing the weapon, and perhaps if the weapon
Serial
was
number.
registered or was registered to other people, and perhaps speaking quickly to them, they can determine who they either gave that weapon to or who acquired it from them. So there are a couple of things right away that they're right there not going to rely just on this person, keeping his mouth shut. They're going to be working very quickly to find out more about him. I would also say, maybe a more positive note about this is that the police were able to get to him, and they were able to get to him because of a report earlier suggesting, well, it wasn't just a report, it was a statement by authorities saying that they actually just went through an active shooter drill with police and response agencies just a matter of a few days ago. And that actually got them on scene, Kimberly, within a short amount of time. They're saying now between a minute and 90 seconds, which is really unprecedented and really goes to show you that by training and awareness, the responsiveness, they were probably able to stop more victims from being harmed and were able to get this individual while he's alive. And even though he's not cooperating now, I believe he will be as we go down the road, and we'll find out more about what was motivating him, as maybe strange as some of these motives may actually be.
Yeah, you're right. Great point, because they had the QRT, the quick response team, and SWAT, tactical units on scene right away. We have some questions for you, Bill, so we'll take it around the table. One.
Bill, one of the things that stands out to my mind is that this is the capital of Maryland, so you have lots of police in addition to normal police for Anne Arundel County. You have Capitol Police and others. You also have the Naval Academy right there. So, so in that case, then you think, well, could this be political? Could it be that this fellow was thwarted trying to get to the Capitol or trying to get to dignitaries at Annapolis at the Naval Academy? You know, we're all just kind of trying to figure this out, but so far, so little information and nothing that we can kind of, you know, get a hold of here.
Yeah, and one, you know, I would suggest to you is that you know, where this individual carried out this crime, certainly, you know, negated his opportunity to do anything further. So, you know, if there was some other larger plans afoot or some other, you know, primary target at the end of his journey, that wasn't going to happen. And so I would probably suggest to you more it's, you know, in and around, whether it's a personal involvement with somebody who worked at this location, whether it was the news organization itself. I think it's something around that. You know, at this point, obviously, you know, we like to politicize a lot of things, but in this case, I'm not willing to go that step yet. I think there's something else we need to uncover before we even go that far.
All right, Bill, we're going to ask you to stand by for a moment, please. Again, Bill Daly, from former FBI agent. And we go back to Trace Gallagher, who has some new information from the scene.
And Kimberly, we just got a comment or a message from the community services editor of the Capital Gazette. His name is Jimmy DeButz, and he released this, and I'm going to read it directly, quoting, "Devastated and heartbroken, numb." He goes on to say, "Please stop asking for information/interviews. I'm in no position to speak. Just know that Capital News reporters and editors give all they have every day. There are no 40-hour weeks, no big paydays, just a passion for telling stories from our community. We keep doing more with less. We find ways to cover high school sports, breaking news, tax hikes, school budgets, and local entertainment. We are there in times of tragedy. We do our best to share the stories of people, those who make our community better. Please understand, we do all of this to serve our community." He goes on saying, "We try to expose corruption. We fight to get access to public records and bring to light the inner workings of government despite major hurdles put in our way. The reporters and editors put their all into finding the truth. This is our mission. It always will be." Clearly, the comments from the editor, one of the few things we have gotten out of this story. We heard from Phil Davis, who's a reporter who was actually inside the room when the shots were fired. But beyond that, we've heard almost nothing, which is odd because when you go back to school shootings, when you go back to the other shootings we have covered, almost instantaneously you have news crews on the scene and you are getting immediate reaction and immediate feedback from the students who are coming out of the school, or in other cases, people who are coming out of the building. In this case, this is the second comment we have gotten from somebody who actually worked for the Capital Gazette, which is odd in this day where social media just commands so much attention. And so far, speaking of social media, we have gotten almost no information, in fact, no information that I have seen about the suspect, his social media footprint, his intent, his motive, and why all of this happened today in Annapolis, Maryland. Kimberly.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Trace. I want to bring back in Bill Daly, if we can, to continue with some questions with him. Bill, just real quick, the ATF confirmed that they responded to the scene, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and they were helped identifying to trace weapons and conduct interviews. So that might be a way to be able to identify, you know, the suspect rather quickly, if they can say where they purchased it, who it belongs to, if someone's on videotape in one of the gun stores or something like that, to be able to get a positive identification.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Kimberly. I mean, obviously, you know, a real good hit would be right away to run the serial number against their database and find out, you know, who it actually belongs to, and if it changed recently, and where if the weapon was not reported stolen, then, you know, they have a pretty good idea of the person who this individual may be. If not, they're going to go very quickly, and as you suggested, take a lot of steps in order to find out the whole kind of the birth of this weapon on through all the hands that it passed and to where it is maybe today with this individual. You know, I think as we talk about these incidents, you know, I think over a period of time, and it's so sad is that we've had to keep speaking about these issues, is that, you know, the issue of workplace or school place or even open kind of, you know, shopping place security has come into the forefront. And it really drives home the issue that, often I'm asked about, which is, what can you do? And there are some things that we can do as individuals to feel as though we're empowered, and that is to be thinking about our circumstances, thinking about whether we're at work, whether we're traveling, whether our children where they go to school, where we go shopping, is to take that responsibility. There's a lot of good information out there put out by the government, Homeland Security, FBI, regarding active shooter kind of reference material, what you should do, how you can better prepare yourself mentally, because often we rely on the government. We say the government let us down, or maybe an employer should have done more. But ultimately, many of this sometimes comes into a personal decision. What to do when you hear a gunshot go off, what to do when you see an intruder. And those are very personal decisions, whether you run, you hide, you fight against that individual. And I would just suggest that more and more people kind of, in this sad day and age, need to kind of be thinking about it. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say really quickly that we're anticipating a news conference about 5:30, so shortly, p.m. Eastern time. So we'll take you to that live as soon as it occurs. And Greg has a question for you, Bill.
Yeah, when you were talking about, and you're in law enforcement, Bill, you know a lot about this, and you were talking about responsibility. And I always think about the responsibility of cable news. Oftentimes when these things occur, for a lot of this time, we have no information, but unfortunately we cannot move on. So we continue with hypotheticals, and we exercise our imaginations to no end, when in fact you really don't need your imagination. I was wondering, for your opinion, how do you feel about the blanket media coverage? Do you feel that that exacerbates any copycats? Does it make it harder to do the job?
Greg, I think, in some ways, and I think there's some case studies that would point out to the fact that, people, when they see kind of that those minutes of fame, whether or not they continue to survive, or whether they give themselves up or take their own life, is that, it does play into it. They know there's going to be a lot of attention. And it's nothing I think we can change, right? So, I mean, we can tell everybody not to be covering these events. They're going to keep covering them. But what we have to do is also, in these early moments, kind of pause and say, listen, authorities need to do their job. If they come out and they start telling us one thing and later on it's contradictory, we're going to find fault with them. Let's give them the chance and the elbow room to kind of move and operate and get the information they need to provide it to us. And also, I would just kind of like to tell everyone is that beside the current investigation going on, is that in all these events, all these major events, there's a secondary investigation. I work closely with people who used to run the behavioral analysis unit for the FBI. They're heavily involved after these incidents, is doing the kind of post-incident analysis, trying to find out what may have happened. Where was that, as we mentioned before, kind of this leakage, these breadcrumbs? Where was something that we should have found out, not reported? And it helps not only law enforcement, but also helps the private community as well to better understand what to look out for, whether it's in the way employees behave, or whether it happens to be former employees, or whether it happens to be customers or other people out there who may harm you, and to kind of understand, have your antennas up. So just let everyone know is that it's not just something that's buried in yesterday's headlines, but there is ongoing analysis done, and that analysis is very helpful, I believe, in helping prevent future incidents.
All right, and Bill, we're going to ask you to stand by on the phone if you could, because again, we're awaiting the police news conference any moment now, and we'll take it live when we get it. Jesse, I know we have some comments and stuff, but it's an interesting point he makes about situational awareness. There's the police that can come and respond, but what can you do also to help yourself and be aware of your surroundings?
Yeah, I mean, 60 to 90-second response time by law enforcement, by the ATF, it seems almost record-breaking, we've been hearing. And the only thing I can think of, you said that they just recently had that active shooter training drill. Do they have a panic button that you hit in reception that automatically silently rings the alarm to alert authorities? Because 60 seconds is just lightning fast. And then just seeing a couple of these over the years that we've covered, to have no ID on you when you carry out a mass shooting and then not to cooperate with the authorities immediately afterwards seems rare and kind of tells me something, I don't know what, but about the shooter and his motivations. It just seems bizarre to me. And because usually these people want attention, and this person for some reason doesn't want attention, or I don't know what's going on in his mind, but
that just strikes me as odd that there's been no identification and he's gone out of his way to not cooperate.
Yeah, to conceal perhaps his identity. So that's why it's going to be interesting to see if they get any serial numbers, in terms of the ballistics or off of the weapon. But a lot of times people who are doing this to try to conceal their identity, they leave their ID at home. They make sure that there's no registration, et cetera, in the suspect vehicle so they can't be traced back and identified. And they also sometimes take great steps to obliterate the serial number on the weapon to also delay authorities. But that's why ATF being involved and confirming that it was on the scene, I think, is so important, because they're experts at being able to do this and identify, markings and ballistics to determine where a weapon, might have originated. Dana, you have a comment?
Well, I'm curious also about then the next step, Kimberly, on this situation. Is this a federal case now, or is it a state case? Because it is in the state capitol there in Annapolis, but if you have the FBI and the ATF there, does that then mean it's a federal case, or is that worked out later on?
Yeah, it's the local FBI field office that's handling it right now in conjunction with the local police and authorities. So the mayor come out, we saw the police department had come out, but you do have a cooperation naturally of federal agencies like the ATF to be able to come in terms of, weapons analysis and investigation, and they also help conduct interviews. So when you have this kind of like resources supplementing a scene like this, it's very important. They're good at this. They're good at doing shooting cases, whether it was active shooters or identifying suspects that have tried to conceal, their identity and determine who else was involved. There's a very healthy interest in trying to get this identified and get some specifics and get some of the investigation details locked down in terms of the forensics. And that's why the crime scene is going to be so important, to be able to get all those ballistics, get the casings, anything left behind that are telltale signs, to kind of recreate the scene and who they're dealing with.
Two other things strike me as odd here. One, the pause. So he was unloading the rounds through these windows in the newsroom, and then there was this dramatic pause, and he somehow stopped shooting. And everyone was very struck by that pause. Was he reloading? Was there a psychological moment that he had? I don't know what that means. And then the fact that the people in the newsroom, the reporters and the editors, have not been on social media, have not been sharing the details. Was there some sort of statement put out by the editor just to lock this down and don't put out anything right now until we have all the facts? Because it would seem in a different situation, if a newsroom was under assault like this, you'd have a massive amount of social media activity and conveying the details of the crime, and that strikes me as something a little different than what I'd expect.
Yeah, and they said right away that they had everybody was evacuated and left the premises, the scene. So then that tells me that they're with the police and with the investigators, and they're conducting pretty copious interviews with each individual to try to recreate what happened, see if there was anything, statements uttered by the suspect during the time. And you can imagine trying to piece it together. It's like a gigantic jigsaw puzzle that's been spread all over the room, and they're trying to piece it back together to say exactly what it is. What is the picture? Who are we working with? What is the motive, perhaps? And I see, okay, we're going to take you live right now to the police update on the shooting.
For some of the information that we've learned or come to know through investigation, some of the questions that you had earlier, we'll have some answers for. And unfortunately, we still have some that we can't answer, but we do have an update for you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anne Arundel County Executive Stephen Shue.
I'm County Executive Steve Shue. As we reported earlier today, there's been a terrible tragedy here in Anne Arundel County. There was an active shooter incident. 5 people are dead. Several more are wounded and in the care of Anne Arundel Medical Center. The shooter is in our custody and being interrogated as we speak. I want to acknowledge the tremendous work of our public safety professionals today, particularly the Anne Arundel County Police Department, the Annapolis City Police Department, and the Anne Arundel County Sheriff's Office. They were on the scene in about 60 seconds. But beyond that, they went immediately into that building without a moment's hesitation and demonstrated incredible courage. And we are so deeply appreciative of their great work. It could have been a lot worse. Governor Hogan.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here. Obviously, our hearts go out to the victims and their families. And I just want to reiterate, County Executive Shue, it's all 3 county agencies, the city police force, county police, the sheriff's department. We have, I think, 10 different other agencies backing them up. All the state police agencies are here as well, federal partners. And, it's a tragic situation. but there were some very brave people that came in and kept it from being even worse, and the response time was incredible. So that's all I have to say.
Chief Cranford.
Good afternoon. I promised you guys an update.
Say who you are.
Deputy Chief William Cranford, Anne Arundel County Police Department. So the building as we speak is now tactically secured, and what that means is our SWAT team and our quick responders have been through the building. It is secure as far as there are no more persons in the building that are a threat to anyone else. We did recover what we thought may have been an explosive device. That has been taken care of. We have members of the bomb squad on scene. We don't anticipate having any more explosive devices. What is happening now that you see behind me is that our Criminal Investigation Division, the actual investigators, are now taking over the scene. We have released it to our members of the Criminal Investigation Division so they can start the process of identifying what occurred and how it occurred and why it occurred. So at this time we had over 170 individuals in the building that were escorted out safely. They were taken to a reunification area over at the Annapolis Mall. We brought Jen Corbin in for our crisis intervention team, who's going to say a few words in a moment, to talk with the witnesses, some of the victims, and the police officers who responded. At this time, we're going to continue the investigation, and we'll have an update for you later on this evening, and I believe Ryan's going to give you a time for that. Jen?
Give us some numbers, please. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Corbin with Anne Arundel County Crisis Response. We have been on several different sites working with both witnesses and police officers following the incident. We will be working continuous throughout the night, both on a phone line and throughout to assist. We are mental health clinicians that will be working both with the witnesses and the officers for the next day or so. So that's what we'll be available for throughout.
Thank you, Jen. I have one more item. This area, the area of the mall, the area of Bestgate Road, is going to be closed for an indefinite amount of time. I can't tell you when it's going to reopen at this point, so if you've received calls, please let them know what occurred and why we have it shut down. The investigation is going to continue into the evening hours, and at that time, when we get more information, I will have another update for you.
Can you or the state's attorney address that? Is the suspect being cooperative? Is he answering your question?
Yeah, I can confirm that we have the suspect in custody. They're currently interviewing him right now. The only other information that I have from questions that was asked earlier is we don't have an identification on him yet. We do know he's a white male, adult male, and the gun that was used is described as a long gun. So I don't have the specifics on that, but we do know it was a long gun. And as we continue to get information, we'll make sure that we continue to put that out. We have no information on motive. Yeah, we're still doing interviews and still doing that. He was taken into custody. He was taken into custody by officers. There was no gunfire exchange between officers and the suspect. Since we were able to get here very quickly, and just something for you guys to know. You know, we have a unified training on how to respond to active shooters, and that's what made one of the major things that made this a huge success. So law enforcement agencies around the entire United States train the same way for these active shooters since we've had critical incidents like this. So it's I don't want to say it's very easy, but it's very easy for officers to get together from other jurisdictions, link up, know the movements, the terminology that's needed to go in and effectively locate a suspect in an active shooter situation and take care of that target inside there. So during an active shooting. Sorry, say it again. I can't answer that right now. That's something that's going to be determined by our investigators as they go through and process that crime scene. So it's going to be a very long night. We anticipate having another update at 8 o'clock. Any information that's new, I'll give out then and make sure that you guys have all that information and any updates as we go along, anything we can put out.
How many victims are in the hospital?
We can confirm that 5 are deceased, and we're still working on injuries for you guys to get a good number. So we're working on that, but it's estimated around 3.
Can you tell us how many people were in the newsroom when this happened?
I don't know how many were in the newsroom, but I know we have approximately 170 that we were able to safely evacuate out of that building and transport safely over to meet with family and friends over at the Annapolis Mall. 8 o'clock will be our next update. I don't have any other answers for you. Any other updates will get out at 8 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Inside or outside the building?
All right, and that was a police, update, hearing from various individuals involved, in the investigation. They say one of the reasons they were able to get there so quickly and save lives is because there is a unified training protocol that is implemented throughout the state and throughout the country so that they can quickly communicate, even if they're from multiple different agencies, to understand the terminology and what needs to be done in a very quick period of time, which is crucial, of course, in a situation like this where they had an active shooter on site. And now, again, that reiterating that sadly 5 people are deceased and there are other injuries, but they're working to get an accurate number of those that have been injured that taken to other medical facilities in the area. They confirmed as to the weapon that it is a long gun, but did not specify as to make or model that was used on the scene. And then also they said that there was what they believe to be an explosive device that is no longer a threat, which is very important in terms of they secured the building tactically and they were able to locate, identify, and I guess disable that item, which is really crucial in terms of preventing additional casualties on the scene, which could have been catastrophic, really stressing the importance of identifying the individual and whether or not there are any other weapons or explosive devices within a vehicle, within a suspect home, or a place of work perhaps where that individual might have worked, or other family members, etc. Let's bring back in former FBI investigator Bill Daley. Just get your thoughts on some of the items that they went through there. And again, for our viewers, they did say there will be an update at 8 p.m. Eastern time. That is the next expected news conference. Bill?
Sure, Kimberly. So a couple of things come to mind. First of all is that, as they say, the individual had no identification on. Certainly suggests that he had some pre-planning ahead, and that he was also aware that he may be taken in custody. But the other thing I'd like to mention, too, is that also they talk about this explosive device. I wasn't too sure from their description whether or not it was actually a device or was suspect that they diffused or they otherwise, they said, kind of neutralized. And then another point, just for the viewers and other folks to understand, is that when police go into these locations and they talk about a tactical team, and then they talk about handing it over to the crime scene investigators, when the police go in, they need to make sure the whole building is clear. Certainly, the site where the incident's taken place is clear, and it's very sad that sometimes actually, having to step over and nearby people who either have been deceased or need aid, and they need to make sure that the first thing is to make sure that they neutralize any potential threat to other individuals and themselves as they go through these locations. Having done some training with, for instance, the NYPD, that's one of the things they tell people is that if they need to come in, they're not going to be stopping every step along the way to aid people, even though they would most likely like to do that. It's really to clear the location, and that's what they've done here. They've cleared location. They've turned it over to investigators who are now going bit by bit, by shell, by shot to find out what happened and what was the timeline on this incident.
Okay, so again, 170 people were escorted to safety for family reunification with friends, family, and relatives, and then there are grief counselors and people working with them there in conjunction with the police obtaining statements about what transpired. Bill, we're going to ask you to stand by on the phone. We're going to bring in Kristen Fisher, who is live at the scene with the latest. Kristen?
Hey, Kimberly, yeah, well, we got a little bit of new information from this press conference. We learned more about the shooter. He is a white man. He is in custody. They would not confirm that it was a shotgun, but they did say it was some kind of a long gun. He is being questioned as we speak, but it sounds like he's not being all that cooperative. The other kind of bit of new information that we got from that press conference is that they did find what they thought was some kind of explosive device. They brought in the bomb squad. They checked it out. Unclear if they detonated something or if it turned out to be absolutely nothing at all, but they checked it out. No problem there, according to what police just told us. And the other thing I just want to highlight, Kimberly, is just how huge the police presence is here. From the air to the patrol cars, to the bomb squads. It is a massive, massive police presence. And, you know, just 1 week ago, we're told that everybody in Anne Arundel County had an active shooter drill. They practiced for a scenario just like this. And of course, we now know that they are being praised for their quick response, a 60-second response. I don't even know how that is possible, but it's clear that if they did not arrive as quickly as they did, that this would have been so much worse. But already 5 dead, we believe 7 wounded, though the lieutenant that just spoke to us said that that number is a little bit fuzzy, that it might go up, might go down, but 5 dead, Kimberly.
Okay, and you bring up a great point in terms of, and you say the sheer volume of law enforcement on the scene, and the officers there said that in fact they had city, county, and sheriff's department there working in concert with 10 additional agencies to back them up to try to process this, in addition to the bomb squad, ATF, and local FBI all working in concert. Let's bring in Trace Gallagher. He has some new information as well.
And Kimberly, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Kristen was talking about there, because they talked about this explosive device, and earlier CBS had reported that this suspect was wearing what they termed as fake grenades. Now, we don't know if we're conflating the two, but he said, all the detective would say on the scene is that the device was taken care of. We don't really know if it was an active explosive device or whether they scanned for more of those, but early in the investigation, they were talking about on the scanner and in the press conferences, they were talking about looking for explosive devices, going through the building and scanning for these things. So right now it's unclear if this person walked in with these phony grenades and thought they would make him look more nefarious than he did, but we don't know if that's the same device that police are talking about when they say there was an explosive device that was taken care of. We don't know if it was exploded, so the context of that remains a bit unclear, and it still is very unclear whether or not this suspect actually went in the front door opening fire or walked in the front door and then began to open fire. The level of where he started shooting remains unclear, and exactly when he stopped shooting. Was it when police surrounded him, or was it, as the reporter said, he just suddenly stopped and then police surrounded him? So some details still to be worked out that are very important as the investigation